Garrett, you know him well as I did. Talk about the effect on the Senate. And he said he thinks he will have the ability, he's confident he will have the ability to choose his successor, which I assume would be Senator Thune.
Well, let's take this one step at a time here. I mean, this is the most consequential and probably controversial Senate leader of modern history, if not the history of the body. He has served in this chamber longer than I have been alive. He's the longest serving party leader in either party, plus a year. I mean, he continues to add to this. And I think I could make an argument that he's responsible for the current makeup of the Supreme Court, the election of Donald Trump, and the failure of the Senate to convict Donald Trump in his second impeachment. Sort of three touchstone political moments of the last 10 years that have Mitch McConnell's fingerprints on them, and that's just from sitting here thinking about it during the course of his speech. Enormously consequential. I think about the timing of his remarks, the idea that he said he wanted to leave essentially with a clean conscience of the work he's been doing. He has been laser focused over the last 5 months or so on making sure that Ukraine gets the aid it needs to keep up its fight. We know that he talked about that in the meeting with the president yesterday. We know that passing this supplemental through the Senate, obviously not the last step in that drama, was an important moment for him, kind of leading him up to this moment. And then he describes what's going to happen next. He says he's staying in the Senate through the end of his term, so he would be leaving in January of 2027. He ends the leadership role in November of this year with his goal, he said, of handing over the leadership position to a Republican majority leader, meaning he will do everything that he can to help make sure Republicans take back the majority this year. Whom that leader will be now will become a subject of intense speculation and a lot of behind-the-scenes arm twisting. Remember, that leader is elected only by Senate Republicans behind closed doors. The three most likely people, and you'll hear this shorthand over the next several months quite often, are the three Johns. All three have served in Senate leadership in some capacity. John Cornyn, who was the Senate Majority Whip under McConnell until the last cycle here. John Thune, who is the current Minority Whip, the current #2 Republican, and John Barrasso of Wyoming, the current #3 Republican. All have bases of support within the modern Republican Party, and all have kind of different degrees of MAGA to them. It's probably not an accident that John Thune, the current Senate #2, and very much a Trump skeptic, let's say himself, endorsed Donald Trump just over this past weekend. John Cornyn did so right around the time that the former president won the Iowa caucus. And John Barrasso of Wyoming, certainly the most MAGA-friendly of that group, was an early Trump supporter in this particular race and has been very quick to put his thumb on the scale in favor of Trumpy Senate candidates like Kari Lake in Arizona, for example. So that kind of jockeying, probably the most important election with the fewest voters in America, the efforts to attain that position will start right now. Although, frankly, they probably started at the beginning of this Congress, if not sooner, as Mitch McConnell's health problems became more apparent, and simply the fact, as McConnell says himself, Father Time is undefeated. He could not and would not stay in this position forever. Andrea?